Good afternoon, and welcome to the 4 p.m. April 27th, 2020 Park Advisory Committee meeting of the East Bay Regional Park District. Chair Rickard, would you like me to do a roll call?
Please.
Thank you. Board Member Elizabeth Eccles.
Present.
Thank you. Chair Rickard.
Present.
Vice Chair Obringer. Vice Chair Obringer. Member Andrade.
Here.
Member Best.
It's here. Where is she?
She's muted.
She is here.
Okay. There she is.
No, I
Member
didn't realize
Best.
I was muted. Linda Best is here.
Thank you. Member Brubaker.
Virtually here.
Member Buren.
Here.
Member Burke.
Here.
Member Carey.
Here.
Member Corkin. Member Corkin. Member Obringer. I saw her come on. Okay. Member DeChambeau. Member DeChambeau. Member Obringer. Oh, she's here. She's muted.
There she is.
There she is. Okay.
I'm here. Yes.
Thank you. Let's see. Member Dieter.
Here.
Thank you. Member Gregory.
Here.
Member Ho. Member Ho. Member Lacey.
Here.
Member Nason.
Here.
Member Robinson.
Present.
Member San Juan. Member San Juan. Member Skardoff.
Here.
Member Sutsui.
Here.
Member Williams. Okay. Staff present. Government Affairs Manager Eric Fuller.
Here.
AGM of Operations Jim O'Connor.
Here.
AGM of Public Safety Chief Chiaburo. Chief Chiaburo. AGM of Public Affairs Carol Johnson.
Here.
Okay, and let's see here. Oh, I'm sorry, Board Member Beverly Lane is also present.
Here. Yeah.
Dave Mason. Christina Kelchner.
I'm here, and I see Board Member Elizabeth Eccles as well.
Yes, yes. And let's see here, Brian Holt.
Here.
Devin Reeve.
Here.
Eddie Willis.
I'm here.
Harold Yamato. And Matthew James.
Here.
And I believe that's it.
Thank you, Sharon.
And I'm here. Adela's here.
Oh, good.
There
Thank
she
you.
is. Okay. Today's Park Advisory Committee meeting is held in accordance with the governor's executive order allowing for members to participate in standing committee meetings remotely. We are also providing live audio streaming for members of the public and have provided the public the opportunity to email or call in prior to the meeting for public comment. This information can be found on the agenda on the district website. Additionally, for members of the public who are listening to this meeting, the PowerPoint presentations used today may be found on the district's website under the Board of Directors, Public Meetings, Notices, Park Advisory Committee Meetings, if you want to look there to see the presentations. Before we get into the substance of the meeting, I'd like to set a few ground rules that hopefully will make the meeting run more smoothly. Because of the number of people participating in this meeting, Please mute your sound and turn off your video when you are not active in the discussion. When you wish to make a comment or ask a question, turn on your video and raise your hand. Those of you who are not familiar with raising your hand on Zoom, you simply click on the participants icon at the bottom of your screen, which will open a separate screen listing all the participants. And at the bottom of that screen is a link to raise your hand. Sharon will be monitoring that to see your hand and ensure that you're called on for the discussion as appropriate. Finally, since we can't see one another and public is listening on an audio stream, I would ask, and this is something I'm going to struggle with myself, that if you're speaking, a committee member or staff member who is speaking, please identify yourself before speaking. Do any committee members have questions about the meeting procedures?
Nope.
Great. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the February 24th, 2020 Park Advisory Committee meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of that meeting?
This is Roland Williams. I would approve those. I would make a motion to approve those minutes.
This is Carlin Obringer. I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Sharon, would you poll the members for a vote?
Yes, Chair Rickard. Vice Chair Obringer,
Sorry, I muted myself. Aye.
thank you. Member Andrade,
Andrade, aye.
Member Best,
I will abstain. I was not present.
Member Brubaker,
Aye.
Member Buren,
Sorry. Aye.
Member Burke,
I was not absent, so I abstain. I mean, I was not present, so I abstain.
Member Carey,
Carrie, aye.
Member Corkin, oh, not present. Member DeChambeau, not present. Member Dieter,
Aye.
Member Gregory,
Aye.
Member Ho,
Abstain as I was not present.
Member Lacey,
Aye.
Member Nason,
Aye.
Member Robinson,
Aye.
Member San Juan, you need to unmute yourself.
Hi. Yes. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Member Skardoff,
Aye.
Member Sutsui,
Aye.
Member Williams.
Aye.
Thank you. The minutes are approved. We will move on to the board member comments. Again, please remember to mute yourself or turn off your video if you're not participating. Director Eccles, would you like to speak to us?
Will help if I unmute myself. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. It's a real pleasure to join your meeting. We all so appreciate the work of the PAC, and you guys do really important work, and it's important to our decision-making process. I thought I would start out by just saying a few words about myself by way of introduction, since I haven't met very many of you, and then of course talk about really what's first and foremost on most of our minds, which is how the Park District is responding to this extraordinary period of time that we're in now with this with the COVID-19 pandemic. So first of all, by way of introduction, I think many of you know I have a great deal of passion for the East Bay Parks. I feel like I really grew up in the parks. As a child, I participated in the Tilden Explorer program and then later served as a junior ranger. And by the time I was in middle school, I would just spend hours in the park almost every day after school, just exploring the trails and spending time out in nature. Later, I had the opportunity to also serve as a day camp counselor in Tilden Park, and my younger sister also worked at the merry-go-round, and my brother at Lake Anza. So it was kind of a family business, I suppose. I also met my husband on a Sierra Club in Tilden Park. Um, and so now I've just really enjoyed getting to know the operational side of the park. I bring a lot of passion to this position, this board position, and also experience, particularly in the public policy area. My day job is as a director of the Public Advocates Office, which is the state's independent watchdog over our energy, water, and communications utilities. And that's been an interesting time there as well. But I accepted that appointment from Jerry Brown about 4 years ago to join as part of his team of senior environmental advisors and remain in that position under Newsom. And in addition to that, of course, my other two full-time jobs right now are, of course, mom is always a full-time job, but also homeschooling my 6-year-old. So it's been a busy, challenging time, like for many of us. But it's an experience, and I hope that we're all able to stay healthy and come out of this collectively with more wisdom and more opportunities to work closely together to make a difference in terms of our environment and impacting climate change as well. So, of course, what's on everybody's mind and on the board's mind as well is the pandemic and how to respond to the pandemic. And our goal is to keep the parks as open as possible, as long as we can continue to protect the health and safety of our public and our staff. We absolutely appreciate and understand that the parks offer people an opportunity for improved physical and mental health, and we saw that reflected in the public health orders that the parks are outdoors, being outdoors, exercising outdoors is deemed an essential activity and has remained so. And so the East Bay parks, for the most part, are open, even though the state has closed its parks and many other jurisdictions have closed their parks. But as you know, this is a rapidly evolving situation. And so we're trying to be as nimble as possible to really continue to achieve this goal of keeping parks as open as possible while protecting staff and the public. And so, as you know, in response to the first order, we did close certain areas that encourage gathering, such as picnic areas, playgrounds, barbecue areas, and also closed bathrooms and shut off faucets in order just to prevent the spread of COVID-19. And then, of course, we saw that first weekend, March 21st and 22nd, the crowds that came out to enjoy the parks, and that demonstrates that people need the parks. But unfortunately, the crowding is what we're all trying to prevent in terms of the spread of the virus, and folks weren't staying 6 feet apart. And so we did have to do some additional closures, as well as close some parking lots, because that, of course, if you can close parking lots but keep trails open, that will deter large crowds of people from coming. And also part of the problem was folks meeting up in the parking lot, gathering up in the parking lot, and then going on hikes in large groups together. And we definitely want to discourage that right now. So, we were really pleased over Easter weekend that I think we got a boost from the weather, but we also did close some additional parking lots temporarily over Easter weekend. And that went pretty well. But with the warm weather um, coming our way and really no clear end in sight to COVID-19, we're hearing that the counties will likely, it will almost certainly extend the orders and may make some changes to them. But I think really it's becoming clear that we're in this for the long haul, and what exactly that will mean for the parks, we will continue to watch. We're fortunately, given that much of our revenue comes from the tax measures, we are still in pretty good shape, and we will be in good shape. So we're not going to experience some of the immediate impacts that some of the cities and other jurisdictions are experiencing right now. But that's not to say that we're immune. So we will be keeping a close eye on the budget. And I also just wanted to talk, and you'll hear more about this, I think, from Jim and from Tony, but just briefly, we've really focused, in addition to trying to protect the public, paying attention to our staff and trying to protect our staff, and Jim and others have done a great job of getting more personal protective equipment, which is hard to come by these days, as you probably heard, and also putting protocols in place to keep our staff healthy as we begin to resume trash service, and in another week bathroom service as well, at least at some parks. So that's kind of a real overview in terms of the COVID-19. And I might just say, on a happier note, I'm excited to the business of the board is ongoing. We're going full steam ahead on our fire mitigation efforts, for example, as well as other planning and acquisitions. And I'll be happy when we can start celebrating some of the landmarks and our milestones, I should say, that are occurring. For example, we're very excited now that the Bay Trail connection in Albany, and we were hoping to celebrate that on the 25th of April, but that we will have a chance, right, Rochelle? And of course, the Albany Beach restoration, and really hopeful that we can still make some progress on the Point Malate Trail break, and so those are probably the big short-term things. And then in terms of my overall priorities for the park district as a whole, not just my ward and upcoming things, very interested in continuing to preserve and protect and acquire more parkland, as well as, of course, deal with the climate change impacts. So that would include both the mitigation on shoreline, as well as particularly the fire prevention and mitigation. And then I'm also very passionate about increasing access to our parks, especially for underserved communities and youth. So those are the things that I'm excited to work on as we move forward. And with that, I think I'll just stop there, and happy to answer any questions if you have them.
Hi, Director Eccles. I see that Member Andrade has his hand up. Did you have a question?
I'm sorry, that was an error. Sorry.
Anyone else have questions? If not, thank you very much, Director Eccles, for your presentation. We appreciate it.
I've
What?
got a hand up.
Okay.
This is Rochelle, and what I have is, it's not so much a question, but I wanted to thank Director Eccles for her help with an issue that arose near Point Isabel with the homeless encampment that needed porta potties and hand washing stations. And those of us who are concerned about that particular area were really very pleased to see the coordination at both the board and staff levels between the Park District and the City of Richmond to make that happen.
Well, thank you, Rochelle, for bringing that to our attention and also making us aware of the program that the Contra Costa County has, because they actually have a program in place for the cities to request porta potties and hand sanitizing stations for the homeless during the pandemic. And so we were able to work with the City of Richmond to encourage that ask. And in fact, the porta potties were delivered yesterday. So that's good. It has a happy ending.
Very wonderful. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? If not, we will move on to the next item on the agenda with Carol Johnson for a foundation update.
Thanks, Rick. And it's very nice to hear from all of you and see you when you're on online here. It's been a couple of months, it seems, and I trust that all of you have been well and keeping yourself healthy, hopefully even in our parks. The foundation has been has curtailed some of its work as it relates to traditional fundraising in lieu of assisting the Park District in messaging the last month or so. Since the shelter in place has been enacted since I think it was March 16th, the foundation has been very active in assisting with social media and other communication channels to talk to our members and to deal with some questions that a lot of the members have had as well. The good news is that people are very supportive and they're very happy that the parks are being maintained and that they are open. And we've had from the foundation very limited reactions that would be other than satisfactory. So that's good. Challenges, of course, is that perhaps it's not the right time to start a capital campaign. So we have that pushed back to not quite the full back burner, but right now temporarily it is not our priority to continue a capital campaign plan for Tilden. It will continue once we come into some sort of new normal with this pandemic. I'd also like to just close by saying, I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but a new subcommittee has been created in the foundation representing diversity and inclusion. And so we have a great team of our own board members and staff that are going to be taking up many issues having to do with how the foundation and the district together are actually involved in providing services to the at-risk communities. So I look forward to taking part more in that and actually having some of our elected board members perhaps taking part in that too. So I think that is the update right now from the foundation. And thanks again for all your support as members and donors.
Thank you, Carol. Anyone have questions for Carol? I guess not. If not, then we will move on to public comments. Madam Secretary, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Chair Rickard. We have no public comments at this time.
Thank you. We will move on then to our presentations. Our first presentation will be on the Emergency Operations Center, an update presented by Assistant General Manager of Operations, Jim O'Connor, and Assistant General Manager of Public Safety, Chief Anthony Chaburo.
Thank you, Rick. For Sharon, can you, this is Anthony Chaburo speaking. And Sharon, can you pull up our PowerPoint? And then Jim, I don't know if you wanted to say hello as well. AJM O'Connor is here as well.
Hello, everybody. Glad to see everybody healthy and safe.
Wonderful. So again, thank you for being here. This is a wonderful group, and this is just a great way for us to continue to work towards the goals of the district. And I am working on getting my video started for Sharon, please. Well, I'm just gonna go for it. So as you can see, I'm Anthony Chaburo. I'm the Public Safety AGM, Assistant General Manager of Public Safety, also known as your Chief of Police. And my partner in this endeavor and in many endeavors is Assistant General Manager Jim O'Connor, and he is the General Manager of Park Operations, or the Assistant General Manager. So let's go to our next slide, please, Sharon. Great. So thank you. So the Emergency Operations Center and what's going on with the EOC. So first off, our Emergency Operations Center is virtual. And it's interesting because we're not in a room. When one pictures some of the emergency operations centers that are currently running, where they're taking people's temperatures and they're wearing masks, we're actually not doing that. So we are 100% virtual. And we started on March 24th, and we started meeting 5 days a week, and now we meet 3 days a week. So the purpose of getting the Emergency Operations Center going was because this event grew, and we all realized that, and it started encompassing all the divisions. So the entire park district started to become involved in this. And once that happens, there's really an absolute need for efficiency. And we need efficiency, and we need proper documentation, because what happens is people start doing what we do. We want to solve problems, and we have separate entities starting to work on the same problem. So the EOC, the concept is we all come together. We all come together as a group, and we shed our titles and the job responsibilities that we have in other areas, and we come together, focus on managing through this problem. Now, we meet Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and our operational periods are Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. That means during those times when we're working, we do at times short planning, short term, but many times, and most of the time, it's medium to long range planning. And that's what we're doing in the EOC. Let's take a look at how the EOC is broken down. And that'd be our next slide coming up. Super. Thank you. So one of the things about the Incident Command Center is that it is very regimented, and that's for purpose, and that's for efficiency, and that's also so we can make sure we can keep track of things. And we all have to learn the EOC language. And it's a little clunky at first because it's not something we do all the time. But this is the incident briefing. This is the ICS Form 201. And this shows what's going on in the Operations Center, Emergency Operations Center, in terms of how we're laid out. So we have the incident commander, and that is yours truly. I'm the incident commander. And my job, in a sense, is to oversee what's happening in the Emergency Operations Center. If we feel we need to make a personnel change, we've made a couple of those. For example, if I think someone is overtaxed, I did that actually with my executive assistant. She was working assigned to logistics, but I realized that she had too many duties of public safety. So we switched out. So I made the decision to move her out of that position, and then we brought somebody else in to help in logistics. Another thing that I'll do is I'll call certain meetings if I think we need to come together on a certain project and make sure we're all in tune. In a sense, I've used the example that we're like a symphony and we're all playing together. In a sense, I'm the conductor, making sure that this is moving in the correct direction. It's not a question of mine being more important than someone else's. It's a question of, are we moving together as a team to solve this problem? You can see on the organizational chart, we have liaison officers. That is Alice Kenner and Alan Love. And they play a very important role because they are the ones that are listening to the county. They attend meetings and they work with the counties. And also, actually, there is a unique entity in Alameda County, and that's the city of Berkeley. So the city of Berkeley has their own health department. Then you have Alameda County and Contra Costa County. So they ensure that we're getting the proper information because that information does have a great impact on us in terms of what we're doing, in terms of closing a park, in terms of what rules and recommendations we should be implementing. Those are coming from our liaison officers who are very tuned in and are attending those meetings. We have a safety officer, and that's Chief Eileen Tiley. And the traditional role of a safety officer is really safety at the physical structure of the EOC. So for example, if we were on a wildfire and we were outside and we had generators and wires and other things powering that EOC, that would actually be the job of the safety officer. In this role, in a role in which we have an emergency which we are managing, such as this one, it's not a wildfire, it's not 24 hours a day in terms of changing things. Her role is mostly has to do with some of the safety precautions we're taking. She's given us safety updates on today, for example, is what do you do with your cloth mask? And if you're like in a household like I am, where I'm the designated person who's shopping and I'm going outside, what do I do with that mask when I come home? I need to make sure I keep it in a place away from everyone else. So that's an example of an update she will give. We have our public information officers, and Carol Johnson heads those individuals. Very important because they sit in the EOC and they're listening to what we're talking about and making sure that we're disseminating the proper information as far as what we're doing in the parks. That could be as basic as a park closure. It could be a recommendation. It could be information pertaining to what we'd like the general public to do more of, or perhaps less of, and they help us. And also assigned in there, we also have a legal team assigned to directly to the incident commander. And so our attorneys will listen in and from time to time offer advice and or field a question. Let's go down to the operations section. And, I think, Sharon, we can go to the next slide. I think now that they've seen this, we can look at everybody's, look at the whole gang. Great. That's a much better presentation. So our operations sections chief, that's Captain Breed. And operations is where things are happening, where they are implementing things that we're talking about. So if we have to do, for example, a park closure, or someone has to go out there and manage something with putting up a fence, or we need personnel out there to maybe clear an area before we close the park, that's operations, and that's what they're doing. AGM O'Connor is our planning section chief, and that's a large job in the EOC. That has to do with planning things out and anticipating what we need. And we talk much of that in the EOC. What are we going to need? What kind of personal protective equipment are we going to need? Masks, gloves, hand sanitizer. Those are things that we need. And we talk about that. What are the protocols for someone entering a building, and how does that work? And how do we actually come up with a plan to distribute those and send those over to operations so they actually drive them to certain places? The logistics section chief, that's Pete DeQuincy. Logistics is important because they obtain things. So when we have an order for X amount of masks, we'll go to logistics and they will get those. If we need hand sanitizer, they will do that. Chief DeQuincy has also mobilized his lifeguards. So they are actually mixing things. We have a joke, we call it the lab. They are actually mixing bleach and other things to make sure, put those in plastic spray bottles and put kits together. So every member of the park district who's out in the vehicle has something to clean with which they can clean their car. Another thing that we did is we made sure that cloth masks were out. We got the cloth masks out, I think, within 6 hours as soon as they arrived, and we pushed them out everywhere to make sure that they're distributed. So that's something that goes from planning to logistics and back to operations, and we work together. The finance side of the house, very important. We need to track money. We need to know what we're spending. The issue that we have in this one, unlike other types of disasters, is that we're fortunate we don't have things that are needed of repair. And my understanding is on some of those other incidents where you have great repairs is where you get more of your federal dollars. This incident, Fortunately, we don't have for example, a flood or something else like that we'd be tracking. Nonetheless, the finance portion is very important. And you can see the other pictures up there as well. We have our liaison officers, that's Captain Alan Love and Alice Kinner. Then you have our safety officer, Chief Tiley, and of course you have Carol Johnson, our public information officer. So this is the team that comes together Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And we meet from roughly about 2 o'clock to maybe 2:20, 2:25. And that's where we come together, and literally it is the passing of the microphone. And we all go around, and the purpose there is to provide pertinent information for that group to make sure that we're moving in the correct direction. Or if we need a course adjustment, we will make that adjustment. And if necessary, we will have additional meetings. And this is what allows us to be more efficient and be more flexible. Again, prior to the EOC operating, I can tell you stories that we were thinking, well, should we meet on Sunday night? And who should come to this meeting? And what should we order? And who's ordering that? And wait a minute, does somebody already have that? Or are our protocols consistent? But by using the Emergency Operations Center, we are much more efficient. And this is what is required for this event in terms of planning. And again, when you think of the EOC, it's all done at Teams. We are using the Microsoft Teams program at the district. It's part of the Microsoft suite. So that's a new word in our vocabulary. We'll see you on Teams. We have all these meetings. And that's really part one of the presentation about what is the Emergency Operations Center. And we can go on to part two unless someone has a question about what's happening at this point.
I think it's fine to go on to part two unless somebody has an overriding question at this moment.
Super. Then if it's all right with you, Rick, then I'll pass it off to AGM O'Connor.
Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Please. Okay, everybody, I'm gonna wait. Sharon's gonna stop screen sharing, and I'm gonna screen share from my computer with you. There we go. Give me 1 minute here. And let's see. There we go. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
I see head shaking.
Yes.
Let's say yes. First thing is, I just want to start off with a little bit of background. We're entering week 6 of the shelter in place. Although at the Park District, we started thinking about this the prior week, anticipating the shelter in place. So we're really in week 7 of planning and reacting to the shelter in place. So everybody knows that started on March 17th. Some of our initial actions when the shelter in place order went into place were we basically closed all of our visitor centers, all of our concession operations, all of our campgrounds, and all of our picnic areas. In addition, as we went through the first couple of weeks, we had staff, and we also reduced our staffing significantly to basic baseline staffing. In parks, that meant we essentially had 2 of our field staff operating in each park unit. And then public safety also adopted a minimum staffing model based on information that we were getting from public health. So at that time, we had most of our parks remained open. After the first weekend, after the 17th, we started reacting to crowding in parks, and what we saw was challenges with social distancing, maintaining social distancing. Currently, I'm sure most of you have been on our website and seen the excellent page that Public Affairs has created related to the pandemic, which really closely tracks what's open and what's closed in parks. I'm not going to repeat that list, but just to make a highlight a couple of things. One is in terms of hard closures. Hard closures are absolute closures where we're not allowing the public to access. We have very few of those out of our 73 parks. And just very quickly, Ardwood Farm is closed. Bay Point was previously closed for construction and remains closed. Point Isabel is closed at this time. Castle Rock Recreation Area within D'Alba Foothills Recreation Area is closed. Sonoma Regional Wilderness is closed. Del Val. Some of the challenges going forward, trash collection, obviously, I'll have a few pictures for you. We've had some challenges with litter, especially with issues with dog waste bags. That's been a big issue in parks. We've been monitoring social distancing, and in the EOC, we regroup every Monday to review what happened on the weekend. And if there are any changes in opened and closed areas, we make recommendations to our policy group, which is our executive management team at the Park District. And those are considered there and then brought forward to the board after that. We've seen a really large uptick in off-leash dogs, despite that we've asked all dogs to be on leash during the pandemic shelter in place. Lots of challenges with vehicles and parking, as you can imagine, as we've closed some of our parking areas. Dogs on beaches has been a large issue, especially at Crown Beach. And obviously having the restrooms and no water fountains open is also being a challenge trying to educate park visitors. Kudos to Public Affairs and our creative design group and our sign shop have reacted quickly during the pandemic and created a series of signs that many of you probably seen out in regional parks, trying to educate people about social distancing and other requirements of the shelter in place. This is on your screen as a smattering of these signs. One regarding dogs, social distancing, no picnicking, no gathering. And then of course, pack it in, pack it out is our messaging around trash. The newest sign that we're just getting deployed out there are about wearing the cloth mask when in situations where you can't properly social distance in parks. Those are just being deployed actually today and tomorrow. And you'll see those out in the parks as you get out. And I'm sure Dave Mason, who's going to talk a little bit about communication, is going to talk a little bit more about this in our social media outreach efforts. Just going through a few of these things, I'm sure some of you see these, know these parks. One of our challenges was Mission Peak and the Stanford Avenue access point. I just want to make sure I point out that the Ohlone College access to Mission Peak is still open and being used readily by people. We tried in many creative ways to close off areas where we thought we couldn't social distance, or touch points as we call them. One of them, of course, was the peaker pole at the summit of Mission Peak. The lower picture on the lower right there is the access at Ohlone College. You see a lot of people going up there. In the Lakes unit, picture to the far left at Lake Chabot, one of the biggest challenges we have with trash, despite a really extensive effort on the part of Public Affairs, we were having real challenges with trash. You can see some of the social distancing challenges. The cattle gates were being left open at Lake Del Valle at the Arroyo staging area, which we kept open. A lot of people leaving those gates open, not wanting to touch them. There's the dog bags we talked about, lots of illegal parking areas. The picture on the right is at Coyote Hills on the area, a parking area along Paseo Padre. This is, I'm trying to remember where this is at. Sorry about that. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't remember exactly where this picture is at, but again, lots of activity in parks, and we're monitoring this on every weekend and reporting out on Mondays to make determinations if we need additional closures. Trash. We resumed trash collection last Friday on the 24th after consulting closely with public health and following CDC, the Center for Disease Control guidelines related to the current pandemic. And we resumed trash collection. And you can see that's been quite an effort in many parks where we were not collecting trash. Lots of illegal parking. You've got the Frederickson Lane parking area at Contra Loma, the picture on the right. This, of course, is Albany Beach. We were concerned after we closed Point Isabel, how that would pan out in terms of use at Albany Beach. Thus far, it's been busy, but not quite the response that we were expecting. We are getting quite a bit of graffiti, as you can see on the picture on the right, which unfortunately is the brand new restroom at Albany Beach. This is Ferry Point at Miller Knox. Not good social distancing on the fishing pier. More trash, as you can see. I think this is the Lafayette Moraga Trail on the left. And at Big Break, we've got that visitor center closed. You can see the vandalism on the restroom at Big Break. Unfortunately, we've had some of the restrooms, not many, but a few of them been vandalized, the ones that were closed. And that is that. And I'll stop screen sharing, and Chief Chair Burrow and myself can be available for any questions you may have.
Good afternoon, Jim. This is Roland over down in Castro Valley.
Roland?
Thank you for that report. I think that was like all of my questions, really. So I really appreciate that. Have there, with the illegal parking on the roadways because the parking lots have been closed, has there been any break-ins? Maybe that's more for public safety, but how about has there been any uptick in break-ins or drop off or any change in that kind of activity?
I'll let Chief Chubro, if he wants to chime in on that.
Hi. There has been a slight uptick. It's not what I would call a spike, and we do go through normal rises and falls with auto burglaries. Usually we'll get a new group of people working in concert, and they'll come into a park and take off, and that'll be responsible for that increase. So there has been a increase. We feel in a way we're one of the areas where people are concentrating. We're open for business, unlike other areas, and perhaps that's a reason for that.
You know, also what's really interesting to everybody is that obviously, since we're the only game in town, as Tony just mentioned, is we're getting a lot of new visitors, what I call new visitors, people who don't use regional parks on a regular basis. And that's been somewhat challenging for staff because they're not habituated to the normal practices in parks in terms of garbage and restrooms. They're not coming prepared in terms of bringing water with them, proper footwear. We're getting people lost. In the first few weekends, we had quite a few people lost. And I'm sure all of you are seeing the same thing I see in my neighborhood. People I've never seen out walking around are suddenly walking around because they're just done looking at screens. So, and they're coming out to parks in droves, and that's a good thing. And it's a challenging thing because a lot of them come unprepared. So that's been another interesting part of managing the pandemic.
Hi, Jim. This is Irene.
I see that that Bruce, Lewis, and Elisa have their hands up. So let me take them first, Irene, and then we'll get to you. Is that all right?
Sorry, I forgot about the hand thing.
Yeah. Bruce, do you want to go ahead?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I had a question about the number of visitors. Well, first I want to say that I went to Miller Knox on Sunday morning after the trash pickup had started, and it was beautiful. It was very clean. In fact, it was cleaner than I've ever seen it. So, so kudos to that, and I'm really glad the trash pickup is happening. I was wondering about data. Do you have a sense about the count, the visitor counts? Everyone is saying that visitation is up. I find it hard to tell because I'm in a park. I see a lot of people walking, but I see no one sitting. Obviously, the picnic areas are closed. Is there truly more people than there normally is? Is there a lot more? What is the data saying if we have it?
Bruce, that's a really great question. Unfortunately, a lot of our data in terms of visitation comes through our kiosk and fee collection. None of that is occurring at this time. I can tell you anecdotally that many staff that have worked for the Park District for many, many years are reporting areas where they think they've seen more people than they've ever seen in the time they've been at those certain parks. Bollinger Canyon at Las Trampas, as busy as Kelly Barrington, my chief of mass. He worked in that area, had his office there for many years, was the unit manager there. And he said he was out there Saturday and he's never seen Bollinger Road so crowded with cars. So anecdotally, certainly a lot of people are reporting a lot more visitation. Of course, also keep in mind we have parking areas closed purposely, trying to discourage patron load, as Chief Chirbo likes to use the term, trying to keep down the numbers of people in parks to promote social distancing. So I don't have hard data, Bruce, but I can just tell you anecdotally, it's very busy out there, and we're just really getting into it. We're just getting into the busy season. And it was one of the reasons why we closed Sunol Regional Wilderness. This is a very, very popular time. And if you've been out to Sunol this time of year, it's a great time to go out there. But it was just getting really hard to control visitation out on that narrow road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You bet.
Lewis.
Yeah, I see a lot of new people in the local parks near my house. People, and I think you're right, there are people who don't know proper park etiquette or expectations. I think a lot of people expect, more of an urban type park that's, more manicured, and they don't realize they kind of get in trouble. They get into off trail and very steep areas, and you're right, they're not prepared. They have street shoes where they should be having hiking shoes. And maybe, one of those new signs ought to be, are you new to this park? Maybe make sure you have water and, just to keep people from getting in trouble. Because I think that's kind of one of the things. You get a lot of, we are the only game in town almost. And so there's a lot of new people who just aren't used to the natural quality of our parks or the parks in general. So just a suggestion there. And I'm glad you're also picking up garbage. I think that's been a real problem, at least locally here in Castro Valley.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Elisa?
Let me turn everything back on. Hi, good to see you again. And sounds like you guys have a lot on your hands, but you're handling it really well. So thank you for that. Of course, my concerns are East Contra Costa County. I know we don't have as many facilities out this way. We have Black Diamond, Contra Loma, Round Valley, and then the trails along that are kind of transit corridors. My concern, and hopefully you can help me figure this out, there's two. The first one, Black Diamond Mines, having the upper parking lot shut down and having everybody walk up the trail from the lower parking lot, that's forcing people into a confined space, because really there's only one trail to get to the upper parking lot. So how is that with the social distancing concerns? Has that been looked at by your team?
That's a good question, Alyssa, and it comes up quite a bit. One of the thinking around Black Diamond was that the road is actually fairly wide and does allow for social distancing, and actually provides that extra half mile or so of walking distance. And really, that's the game that we're trying to promote in regional parks right now. It's all about exercise, time in nature, not about picnicking, not about gathering, not about playing sports. So closing the upper lot reduced the patron load, but also provided that roadway for additional walking and in a wide space. So that was our thinking around that.
Okay. And so connected to that question is just access and parking in general. I know we're trying to limit it, but there's just a handful of parks in our region. Allowing people to access it and still have that time in nature, I think it should also be an equal priority. So accessing Contra Loma, accessing Black Diamond Mines is something that is getting difficult to do, especially with the parking on Frederickson. There's not a lot there. The park at the bottom of Contra Loma, the Antioch Community Park, doesn't allow parking. So you have parking on streets and impacting communities around there. Is there a way to allow access to either Black Diamond or Contra Loma, but without access to the picnic grounds? I know that can be difficult because people ignore signs.
Yeah, the challenge there, Alyssa, is that we tried reopening the parking lots. The load of people, that just ignored the no picnicking signs was really large, and so we reclosed the main park area. And again, this is difficult for the park district, because I think all of you have been associated with us for many years. You know, our big thing is access. We push against a lot of communities, local communities, to promote access and to sustain access into regional parks. In this case, we are I guess the best way I can put it is planned inconvenience, which is not something normal for us. But the idea here is that if you're having difficulty accessing a park, the message really is you need to go somewhere else. You need to come at a different time, go to a different park. It's not normal for the park district to behave in this manner, but we're trying to keep the parks open, but also comply with the social distancing aspect of the shelter in place. So I can't tell you how difficult these decisions are that we're making. And you're pointing out we've really had those conversations around different communities, especially communities that have limited access. For instance, Round Valley has been really, really a difficult park during the shelter in place. A lot of dog use, which of course is prohibited there, a lot of crowding. Yet we made the decision because that was one of the few parks in East County to keep it open despite all those challenges. So we've been working with staff on public safety side operations to keep that park open, but it's really, really difficult. And Frederickson Lane is, it is difficult, and I don't have an answer for that, but we're doing our best.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jim. Irene.
Hi. Thanks for the update. And I have a question a little bit about the garbage situation. I know that this is brand new for everybody, for the park district. And if this reemerges in the fall, we will be better prepared, I'm sure. But I was hoping that through experience, we learned that taking away the garbage service was not a good idea. Because that's one thing I think that maybe we could do better on the next time. As a matter of fact, beyond the garbage, it might even be advantageous to even agendize at the next meeting, maybe some other ideas that the Park Advisory Committee would want to share for the fall if this happens again.
Well, Irene, I can tell you there's no shortage of ideas coming our way. And I'm being honest about that. I mean, from every angle, everybody's got an idea of how to help, and we appreciate that. But the issue with the trash that I think is really important for everybody to understand, a lot of the curtailment of trash collection in the restrooms was really about our staff, trying to ensure that we could protect our staff during this time. Since they're out there in the communities and then going back to their own homes, we had to ensure that we had proper protocols that would protect them. So we've spent a lot of time in the last few weeks really working closely with our public health departments and with the CDC guidelines and coming up with new protocols. And that's why we were able to restart the trash collection on Friday, because we felt like we had enough personal protective equipment, PPE as we call it, for staff to go to the next level, even though those activities are both that and restroom cleaning are seen as low risk from the public health perspective. Obviously, you can understand the concerns that staff have about that and about protecting their own families. So we were able to secure a supply of what are called KN95 masks, a version of the N95 masks used in healthcare settings that come in from China. They're not certified by NIOSH, but they have the same specifications. So staff have those masks now available to use as an alternate or an optional PPE. So we felt comfortable moving back into trash collection. But that decision to halt trash collection was really based on protecting our staff. And we took that as a #1 priority. Until we could resolve that, we had to live with what we all lived through there for a couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Tony. I see no other hands raised unless there's someone further who wants to ask questions. If not, thank you both, Jim and Tony. Oh, Jim?
Just one final thing is, I think all of you who've been following the whole information coming out of public health and out of the CDC and out of the state from the governor's press briefings, you know that this social distancing will be with us for many months. The shelter in place today, the local public health said that the shelter in place will most likely extend through May. So one of the next things we're doing through the EOC process is trying to think ahead about what does that mean for regional parks? What will it look like if we go for months of social distancing? Can we reopen picnicking? Can we reopen campgrounds? So I just want to assure all of you that we're looking at that. Staff are both on public safety and operations. We're meeting, we're talking about what would that look like to promote social distancing in a park, but still have picnicking. What could we do to promote that? So we're looking at those options as this moves forward, and as we get more detailed direction from public health on the next stage of the shelter in place. They're trying to loosen some recreational activities up, and we don't know what that means yet, but we're looking forward to getting some of that information this week, and hopefully we'll be able to inform all of you once we figure out what our next steps are.
And then, Rick, I had some for you as well.
Okay.
I just wanted to again thank our partnership with operations and commend their work, and also let everyone know that public safety, we are dogged and determined, and we are on duty, and we are willing to serve as the rest of the park district is. So it's a great group effort, and there's a fantastic group of people out there that are working very hard. Thank you.
Great. Well, thanks to both of you. I know it's been a tough month or so, and it's not going to slow down anytime soon, but we appreciate the update and wish you the best. I think then we'll move on to our next item, which is Dave Mason talking about the COVID-19 Park District communications.
And I'd like to start, because Dave and I are joined at the hips with this, by first saying that the pandemic is a crisis in itself, and certainly we hope that it is going to get better in the months ahead, but nobody really knows at this point. But from a public information perspective, and I wouldn't use the term public relations, it's very different than public information. We're trying to communicate to the public in the most simplest, direct way to tell them essentially what types of behaviors we're expecting in our parks. But we're also sharing the involvement that we have with the county health departments, and that is both counties, Alameda and Contra Costa, have in fact been very involved with parks, specifically with us, on a daily basis, and in fact engaging us and asking us to continue to keep our parks open, which is very unusual, because I don't know of any other healthcare agencies in the state at this point that has asked its park agency locally to stay open for the benefit of access to nature and for wellness and for healing during this time. So we are working very closely in messaging based on what our park partners in health are interested in, but we're also messaging from our own kind of crisis standpoint of what we need people to do. So with that, and as you know, I have a great team that includes not just Dave, who is our official PIO for the Park District, who's been managing all of the media just quite amazingly. And by the way, most of it doesn't come in during the regular working hours. I can attest to that. And then, of course, through our signage group, who has been working an amazing amount of time, over 2,000 signs. I think it was initially 1,600 was as of 2 weeks ago, but we've added much more than that. So we're up to about 2,000 signs and a variety of other communication channels that we're using to get the word out. So I'm going to introduce Dave now, who's going to take you through kind of the process and what we are actually doing to give our public as much information, as accurate and as updated as we possibly can. So Dave, would you like to start your presentation? Dave?
Hi there, Dave Mason.
Okay.
Share my screen with everybody. I have to remember to unmute, right? So here, give a second here to share and get the presentation going. Okay. Hopefully everybody can see my screen. Can someone verify?
Yes, Dave, we can see it.
Perfect, perfect. All right, I'm just going to start kind of talking about this. The real goal or to here is kind of an overview of all the communications that has taken place from basically around March 15th, even a little bit before that actually, to today. It has been a whirlwind with myself and other folks on the team, as Carol has mentioned, with multiple hours beyond the norm, definitely an emergency crisis communications model is what we've kind of put in place. So just gonna talk first about basically, you know, this is a rapidly evolving, not only a crisis, but this is a kind of a continually changing and moving situation with different information coming from different places, mostly the health agencies, but also the governor, and, you know, folks are figuring out what the policy or what that meant for the park districts. A lot of these shelter in place, stay at home orders, you know, were put out there to the general public, but we had to really, you know, find out quickly, you know, what it meant for the park district, and then obviously figure out how to communicate that in an understandable way to the public and employees as needed. So basically, you know, here are some of the factors that were in play. Obviously, is that rapidly evolving communication situation that we were trying to deal with. Other factors, obviously, that were challenging was everybody was working from home, and a new thing too, to try to write, develop, get out everything with everybody communicating in a different new way. We actually handled that pretty well, but definitely was new. So what was our kind of public information approach and our strategy? You know, what does it mean to kind of communicate to folks, and what type of communication? Basically, a couple different types. I think Jim said this at first, you know, basic information about like parks, what's open, what's closed, you know, what type of facilities are closed, what's open. I mean, there's a lot of questions that people have about our parks and facilities. And so having basic information, nice, put together and out in a crisp way is key especially in a crisis or in an emergency, when folks were looking for information as quickly as possible in practically real time. We also had a lot of visitor information that we needed to provide about safety guidelines, things for visitors that were going to still come to the parks. And so getting that information to them as well through different communications places, signage, things like that. But we had to basically inform visitors who are actually going to come and be in our parks to how they can behave and what they need to do. And then last is really public and district messaging. What we wanted to the public at large to understand, what we wanted them to think about and understand about the district's efforts and work during this time. And that's a key part of public information as well. The other ones are hugely important, but obviously we have to keep in mind that what we want folks to remember and understand about the situation beyond just the basic facts per se. So here are some kind of those key type messages that we were working with throughout this as things were unfolding. Some of these facts have already been kind of mentioned, but we want to make sure the public understood this as well, because people are at home, they're getting information from different sources. There's a lot of confusion. And so obviously we want to make sure we get information out about the situation. So number one, this essential activity, basically the state and local orders all called out outdoor recreation as an essential activity, as long as social distancing was being followed and maintained. And so a lot of folks at the beginning thought that, you know, you couldn't get out because they didn't have the information yet, didn't understand that this was the case, that folks are you know, basically it's a allowed activity during the shelter in place. And as Carol mentioned, a huge thing at the same time in the situation, the health agencies were asking us, really asking us to stay open as much as possible in this situation. As folks were sheltering in place at home, they understood people needed to get outside for healthy type activities. And that's the next one, health and wellness. It was really clear early on with all the different viewpoints going on, but it definitely was clear that there's a lot of people that rely on our parks, even more so during this crisis, for stress relief, health and wellness type activities, that it was really like an essential core part of their health to be able to get out into nature or on the trails for exercise. So those are some of the basic ones, and the next ones are kind of, we want folks to understand this, man. We were in the situation. The public needs to understand that we were doing our best in the situation. We were managing things in real time, the operations side, public safety side. The district itself was, really doing this in real time to do the best we could to keep as many parks as open to the public as possible. And that was a challenge when you're trying to balance the public's need for parks with obviously the need for health and safety and the health orders that were coming down, the health orders that were changing and modifying, it almost seemed like a day-by-day basis at the very beginning. And then the last one really is when it came to folks being in the parks and the behavior that we needed the public's help. We needed them to follow the rules. We needed them to be responsible because we wanted to keep parks open as much as possible, but we really needed the public's help and still do. And I'll get to that, really still do in terms of following the rules and being responsible in the parks. So why is public information important? A big thing is, important to get accurate information out. So we need the public to trust the district, trust whatever government agency there is, that the information they're putting out is accurate and timely. And so that's, people rely on that. They go to the website, they look at the last notice on social media to figure out, what park's open and what's not open. They don't want to drive to a park, find out they can't go in, or just do things like then break in or whatever they would do. We need to have accurate information out to them in real time. Also, this is a health and safety issue. So an emergency really, and we needed to get information to folks about how they should be in parks, social distancing, what they should do on a narrow trail, what they need to do in staging areas. So trying to get that information out to folks about how they should behave to keep themselves safe or safe as possible was huge, or is huge still in this situation. And then of course, we want folks in this situation to understand we're doing our best to keep parks open. We need help keeping parks open. We needed folks to have the best behavior in the situation because we want to keep parks open because we were still are, subject to additional health orders. And so this is all subject to, us and the people in the parks, behaving as best they can so that parks can remain open. And folks needed to understand that. And lastly, why it's important is that as this all unfolded, the park district was really being called on as an essential element of this, health emergency we were all going through. Wasn't just a byproduct of sorts. It was like, this emergency is going on and everybody is looking at the park for help to get outside, to keep open as much as possible. And so the district was being called on and we, through all the good management of everyone, stepped up to the situation, stepped up to the challenge, and still are. So getting the message out, what we're continuing to do, how we're getting the message out to the community. A lot of different ways when it comes down to a crisis communications model where you're implementing every single kind of channel you have as best as possible, and with some resources as well when possible, when it's prudent. But a big part of the first step is always message development. Like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of different things coming down the pipe. You have to understand and really put together information, what's true from a health standpoint, what's true from the health order, what does it mean in our parks. That's why the EOC is so great, because it does allow good communication with operations, public safety, to make sure our messaging is as accurate as possible, because that's definitely important. Internal communications as well, making sure the folks, employees have the correct information about the situation. Our webpage was huge in this, getting tons of hits. Obviously, folks going there for, are the parks open? Are they closed? Other agencies around us are closing and whatnot. They were questioning, obviously, what the status of their local parks were. We had PSAs on broadcast media. We had those, I believe, on CBS, NBC. Phil might want to add Comcast Cable with a cable buy to get some additional get the message out even more. But basically we had about 7 PSAs that were put together and were broadcast and still are being broadcast in local media in the Bay Area.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, but to include Spanish language television as well as PBS, in addition to the others that he had mentioned, ABC, CBS, NBC, and Comcast.
Yep. Yeah. So that was not a, and that was all done, I would say, within like a 3-day time period back when, back when things were, you know, our parks were closing, but they were still, some were closing, or certain areas were closed, parking lots and whatnot, to manage the situation. They were basically really, really busy. It all happened after that really, really big weekend. What is it? March 21st, 22nd, when everybody was going outdoors. People were going to the coast and Marin. Tons of people were questioning whether parks should be open globally. And we were just doing our best to stay open, have a management plan in place, operations, public safety, do that piece of it. But we we put a PSA together in about 3 days. Juliana of the foundation was key to that. And, you know, just a huge, huge feat to do it as quickly as we did. In normal circumstances, that would take weeks, if not months. But it was like, you know, my family, other people's families getting together to be in the, to be modeling correct behavior in parks. So that was a big deal. Press releases. We've so far done, I think, 8 press releases over the course of this situation. And these aren't your easy press releases, just, you know, an event, you throw it together. These are implementing or understanding the health orders, what the district is doing, what the operations is doing in the parks, and putting it all into a press release so it's clear and crisp with our messaging to the public so that they're informed. And it's 8 press releases that have been done. Social media posts, we've done 140 social media posts just on COVID-19 during this time. We did 5 next door notices to the whole district. That's 800,000 people reach wise. We did email blasts to our e-news network of 60,000. We did an op-ed. We're using media partnerships. We have a lot of media partners, and they're doing either pro bono or affordable kind of informational ads to help get the word out. Signage in parks, I'll go back to that, but that's a huge one that Jim mentioned. But it's basically, that's where visitors are actually going into the parks, and that's where they need information sometimes the most. But it's a challenge, obviously, having tons of signs and tons of information. How do you do it in a timely manner? You know, we're a big, huge park district. How do you have it, you know, to prioritize, you know, where it goes? So that's a big deal. Virtual town halls, our elected officials, our board has participated in a number of town halls with local cities or local electeds, and have helped get the word out to visitors and the public that way. And then, of course, you know, getting the information out again to our employees so that they can then get it out to their friends if they're in the parks, the board members, so the folks that they talk to, their networks. We just make sure they have the information so that they can provide it. You know, and that was, you know, this is all a challenging effort in real time as things were taking place. And then, of course, responding to a lot of requests that we have gotten through email and public social media. A lot of requests, simple as, you know, is this park open, to more detailed ones like, you know, can I get sick if I, you know, am less than 6 feet close to a person? I just, you know, all types of questions that come in through correspondence and social media. But that's a breadth of basically what we've been doing to get the information and the messages out. I'll point out before you move on, kind of the top one, message development. We talked about developing the message, but throughout this whole time, this month and a half, consistency of message is a hugely important thing to having credibility with the public, helping the public, knowing that they can go to us for good information, solid information, and trust us, is that consistency, so that all the press releases, all the information has a, you know, is not conflicting with each other. And when you're doing so many communications in such a short period of time, on such a fast pace, it's, you know, that is a challenge, but it's super important. I think we've done a great job at that. Another reason the EOC is helpful. Here is the PSAs. I'm not sure if this is going to play with sound or not to everybody, so I'm just going to let it run a little bit so you can kind of see the 30-second PSA that's been up on broadcast. To keep these parks open and safe, a safe 6-foot distance. So I don't know if anybody was able, were you guys able to hear that at all or just see?
It was great.
I could only see it. I couldn't really hear it that well.
Okay.
Good
Yeah,
message.
so it was on our website. It's on our website still. All of those, the 4 core ones are on our website, 3 15-second ones and 1 30-second one. And that was a 30-second one we just showed that kind of has the overall message with it, and they're being updated. We had versions of those that went up just for Easter because we had some special Easter closures. And we're still looking at ways to update those with, things are continuing to change and adjust. So here's a sampling of our press releases that we did just to show everybody kind of how things were moving. We went from, this will show it. I'm just going to kind of go through. Basically, we started off in early March with, canceling programs. The first order, or if you want to call it an order, I don't think it was an order, but basically kind of was saying to cancel events under a certain number. And so the park district, was going after taking care of that, since we do have a large number of, events that are planned. And then we also have rental facilities as well. So we had to get that announcement out. And then we had, basically out of a preponderance and caution, since it was tied to that, we ended up closing our visitor centers, rental facilities, and a lot of programs were canceled. It was kind of weird to have a program with 30 people coming out and doing a program with naturalists when all of this was breaking early on. And obviously now where things are, you can't do it. So it was definitely, we were a little bit ahead of time there, or appropriate, I guess you'd say, and smart. Then we ended up closing all of our building facilities. And we still had parks and trails though, however, still open and accessible. So that was really when big things came down where we had to, look at what we were going to do. And we closed a lot of our facilities like bathrooms and water fountains, other amenities, things of that nature, that just to emphasize that trails though were still open and accessible. And then we had announcing our closures that we had to do. A plan was put in place. This is after the weekend of the 21st and 22nd, where the Marin, obviously there was a lot of the story, saw huge busyness and huge crowding, but obviously the local parks, our regional parks were inundated. Some would say overrun that first nice spring weekend when folks have been in place for a short period of time, but looking to get outside. And then after that, plan was put in place to put some parking restrictions and park closures in place, just some, to help limit overcrowding and address, the public and staff safety. And then we had a new order came down. We had Point Isabel close as a dog, it's referred to, or a lot of people refer to it as a dog park, and the health orders came down. That was the spirit of their order. So that took place. Obviously temporary Easter closures. Mission Peak, then we had some closures temporarily, then a continuation of that closure. And now we just had the mask press release and mask announcement to ask folks to wear a mask when within 6 feet of others. Now we have social media. Just go through this real quick just to show some of the posts and some of the feedback that we got. A lot of folks paying attention, so our reach was up, but it was a good way to get information out, and we did boost a lot of our posts as well, since it was an emergency and we really needed to get the information out. Let this folks look here. Here's some posts. In general, at the very beginning, posts were all over the place. In terms of folks wanting to close parks, some people saying keep them all open, some folks in the middle saying they're seeing good social distancing, some people aren't. Overall, it was just a mixture of emotions and posting going on. These are all posts, some of our 140 posts that have gone out on COVID. But you have a lot of folks starting to post, positive things like, oh, I hiked yesterday on the parks. Thanks so much for staying open. I rely on it, for my health and mental sanity now more than ever. So you started seeing more and more of these posts as things went on, and we had our plan of limited, parking lot and staging area closures. Instagram. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And we have about 39,000 followers on Facebook, 11,000 on Instagram, and 11,000 on Twitter. And then signage in parks as well. This is the fresh picture. And just Jim mentioned a lot of these, but here's the basic 6 that have been kind of going out there in addition to the actual closure, park closed, area closed signs. So this is the COVID, visitor information ones. The top left there was our first one that was done. And they moved on a little bit to ones that were a little easier to read, less text and more symbols. But that was the first top left one. We had that after the shelter in place came down, we had that up in parks within a day and a half, which is a huge feat in terms of design and production and distribution. To have that start showing up in parks a day and a half later was pretty good. To your crew in operations, Jim, our signage folks, so a big deal. And then you see the other signs there, with the most recent one being the mask sign. And our goal is always to be as crisp and clear as possible. And these all were done, in a very, very fast timeline as well. Luckily, our pack it in, pack it out one, we might keep those up, but luckily trash service is starting back up. So that's great. So what's new? What are we doing now? We've spent a month and a half doing this. We're still going to be doing it. Is the what's new? We're still going to be getting information out about how folks should behave and how they should, what they should do in regional parks and what parks are open and what's not. But we're also going to start, we already started doing some things that, show our employees and how they're helping keep parks open. This is there for the public. We're answering the call. And we want to highlight some of our great employees that are out in the field helping that happen, as well as show positive feedback from the public. We're seeing a lot of posts now, folks appreciating now the district's stance throughout this about keeping parks open as much as possible. There were a lot of calls early on about closing parks, this and that. We took we implemented or understood the shelter in order, what it meant, what folks were asking us to do and stay open as much as possible. We came up with plans to do that while also limiting limiting and trying to prevent overcrowding with our operations plans and operations. And here we are. Folks are saying and understanding that now. It's not perfect, but through all these efforts and these new efforts of trying to get this information out, that's what we're doing. So here's our We Are EBRPD campaign. Some of you might have seen these. Those are who are active on social media. Together, we are EBRPD, and showing pictures of our staffs doing their thing in the field. And it's been really positively received. Here's some more posts with some of the highlighted, or just a sampling of what folks are saying. Thank you for wisely keeping parks open. I do daily, and I go daily, and I'm happy to report, observe other people properly social distancing with rare exception. But you see a lot of appreciation, especially for our staff. They're the ones making it happen. And here we have some other ones. We have our cool program going on with our naturalists through some digital learning and virtual videos and things like that. People are loving those on social media, but it's also another chance to get the information out. Public safety, of course, there. And even, we have somebody here from our essential stores those are the folks that get a lot of the supplies out to our parks where they need them. And then wrapping up here is our Love EBRPD one. Done a couple of posts on this, but basically taking what folks are saying out there and putting it out with their picture or not, what they're saying. So we're sharing the good things, the appreciation folks are telling us. So we see all these posts, myself, Carol, Jen, Vanya, our social media person. We see all these posts of people saying, thank you so much. Thank you. These parks are great. Well, we were like, hey, let's turn these, let's more people see these. And so that's what this Love EBRPD campaign is about. And here's the final question. Are people getting the message? People are out in parks. You have the pictures. They're doing it. We all know, operations side, we know it's not perfect. We know whatnot, but we're trying to model. This is all about, on the public information side, modeling typically the behavior that you want, showing people doing the good behavior. We have plenty of pictures, and it's true of people what happens when they don't do it. Trash piles up, things take place, things get broken, social distancing, people are too close, but a lot of folks are trying to do their best out in the parks. And so that's an important piece of this. But it's tough because in a quick time frame here, getting information to folks that what they need to do, what's open, it's a challenge in a short time frame with mostly a low, we're not Coca-Cola with putting millions of dollars behind an advertising campaign. We're looking to try to get behavior change, with the resources we have, which does take time and is not perfect at the end of the day. But I think people are trying, as we've seen, but we definitely need better compliance, because we know, just okay is not okay. The advertising slogan works here. It's just in a health emergency. It's true. We need better compliance from folks across the board on all of our things, ranging from dogs in parks and being on a leash, social distancing, no picnicking, you name it. There's a lot of things to talk about and have folks improve. Okay. This is a good time for questions.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. Yeah, we have a couple minutes for questions. We do need to move on to the Concord Hills here pretty quickly, but I see Linda's hand is up. So Linda, if you would like to ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry for joining the meeting late. I had an unexpected truck delivery of a refrigerator and then technical difficulties. I was in Las Trampas yesterday, and I really thought there was a lot of good compliance with the majority of the people I passed. But I have to be honest, there were 2 Hispanic families that walked by, and in both cases, the parents and the kids were just using their hands to cover their mouths as they walked by. So I just was curious, what have we done with our signage for compliance in other languages, particularly Spanish?
Well, yeah, actually, all of our signs do have Spanish translation on them. So all the signs that I pulled up do have that. And we do try to get the word out and include sending to social media. We have Monaco as well, community relations, who has great relationships with all ethnicity media outlets. And so I understand they've been getting information out as it comes up. It's just been in real time. So this whole thing is a challenge in that real time nature. Let me see if I can pull up the signage again real quick. And that would go from there. Oh, we have to share. But yes, we have everything in Spanish, and we've been even early on. We're still trying to translate it. We have Spanish translation of our webpage.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to report that experience, and I just felt like that overall it was a very positive experience. People were staying on, other sides of paths, turning and looking the other way, very respectful, and a lot of social distancing. It was a good experience. So thank you for your signage and getting the word out and leaving the parks open. And hopefully we can get the word out to our Latino community as well.
Yes, thank you,
Yeah,
Dave.
I see all of them are in,
Thank you, Dave. You guys did an amazing job in a short period of time to really get the word out. And I know I heard a PSA on KQED like 1 or 2 days after they decided at the board meeting to go for it. So really good, rapid response. If there are no other questions, I see no other hands raised. Then I think we should move on to our final presentation. Devin Reef will talk about Concord Hills Park naming.
Good evening. I'm going to open this up. Brian Holt, Chief of Planning and GIS. Good to see all of you, and happy to see business moving forward at the Park District. I just wanted to say, the Acquisition, Stewardship, and Development Department, we're continuing to work to move projects forward, and we really feel committed to the idea that parks and open space and access to parks and open space are more critical than ever. So we're real excited to be able to move forward with the Concord Hills Land Use Plan and the Concord Hills naming item. So the item that you have before you today was a PAC requested exercise to specifically discuss the name for Concord Hills, which, as you know, was a temporary name. So Devin Reef will be leading us through an exercise there, and we'll also be demonstrating just the real extensive public outreach that was done as part of that project. as we move projects forward within the planning department and the ASD department, we're really looking forward to how we can best engage the public, knowing that social distancing is going to be with us for a while, and knowing that we want to continue to move our projects forward. So this is a good example where we've been able to really complete a lot of robust public outreach. And as we move forward our other projects, we'll be looking forward to new tools and new strategies to make sure that we can do that. So with that, I'm happy to introduce Devin Reef, Principal Planner, and we also have Eddie Willis, who's a planner within our department, but not new to planning, as he's been with the district for many years and has served as a naturalist out in the Concord Hills area. So have really benefited from expertise too. So with that, Devin, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone, from the committee members to the public listening. I'm Devin Reef with the East Bay Regional Park District Principal Planner, joined by Eddie Willis, my partner here for planning the adoption of the new regional park land use plan and the naming for the plan, the naming for the new park, that is. So today we're here for an informational report and a hopefully interesting exercise, polling exercise with the PAC members. This is all part of, as Brian mentioned, the adoption plan for the land use plan itself. So let me share my screen and begin the presentation. The way that the Park District names new parks follows not only a policy, but a series of contexts. We look at the land through a series of lenses: historic, cultural, natural, and aesthetic. And so some of that is what I'm going to show you today. Excuse me, let me get there we go. So of course, the future regional park is in the eastern part of the city of Concord, the former portion of the former Concord Naval Weapons Station. It's both at the eastern section of the city of Concord and at the border with the city of Pittsburgh. There are views to the Delta, to Mount Diablo, and to our Black Diamond Mines Regional Preserve, and there'll be future regional connections there. This map shows that the park is really in two sections, both the northern section and the southern section, divided there in black by Bailey Road. The Concord Hills Land Use Plan was released just last October, but really was the work of 5 years of community engagement, participation by Concord residents and elected officials and city staff, developed in close coordination with the United States Navy, the city of Concord, and the citizens, as I mentioned. So the main goal with the plan is to maximize resource conservation and protect public access and provide a new recreational facility and facilities for the next decades to come. The Park District, as I said, has a naming policy. It was actually adopted in 2004. For people who aren't able to see this slide at home, let me read this to you. This is an excerpt from it. It says, regional parks, trails, features, areas, and facilities will be named after natural features such as plant and animal life, geographic, topographic, or paleontological features, or for cultural features such as archaeological and historic artifacts, historic persons, families, or events. Existing historically related names shall be respected. And the policy also has with it a sequence of events for how a park gets named. Let me just remind everyone how that happens. So park names are suggested. First, the Board Executive Committee considers a name and makes a recommendation. The Parks Advisory Committee considers that. If it disagrees, it makes its own recommendation, and the Board Executive Committee meets again and comes up with a name, which ultimately goes to the Board of Directors. If the Park Advisory Committee does agree, then it will also go to the Board of Directors. So right now we're in an informational meeting. We're sort of right here in the beginning. We're not really on the naming process, but because the Park Advisory Committee wanted to have this discussion before the Board Advisory Committee, we're here tonight. Of course, ultimately the Board of Directors will decide the park name. So let me talk about the historic context and the cultural context here first. Let me go through that. It begins, of course, with the native people who were here for thousands of years. The Chupkan people were a Bay Miwok language speaking population with a village in what is today present-day Concord. The ecological landscape here is annual grassland, oak savanna, and riverine riparian habitat, which I'll look at it in a few minutes. Following the native habitation here was the ranching era, which really began with Mexican land grants in the early 1800s, followed by families, the Bowman families and Geringer family ranches in the 1900s. And this is an image of the Monte del Diablo, a map of the Monte del Diablo ranch from the early 1800s, and from the 1900s, the Old Cistern, which is an amazing historic property on the park site itself, preserved, left in place by the Navy over its many years. What people really know this land for is its military use. Following Pearl Harbor, the Navy began acquiring the land from the ranching families, and it was used from the 1940s through the 1990s as armament warehouses and distribution. Here's an image of African-American sailors taking munitions from a train car. Of course, it's the land is tied up with the Port Chicago explosions of 1944 and the civil rights changes that came through that tragedy throughout the country. And we are going to be telling that story with the National Park Service at our future visitor center. There currently is, of course, the Port Chicago National Memorial just 4 miles away at the actual explosion site. So after the Navy closed, we are left with incredible views of Mount Diablo, views of the Delta. These are some of the aesthetic qualities of the site that a name can also accommodate. Views of the Delta, the grassland habitat, annual grassland, which we'll be working for the next decades to renew and restore. The beautiful oak savanna, mature trees, probably going back 100, if not hundreds of years. And the riparian habitat of Mount Diablo Creek, which runs through the site. The City of Concord, through its community reuse project, and the Park District will both be sharing with the renovation and restoration of this riparian habitat. So as Brian mentioned, we've had years of community kind of process, community engagement. Through those efforts, we've acquired basically the top 10 or 11 names that are shown here on this slide. Those names were suggested and vetted most recently back in October when we had a big community meeting out at the site. And let me read those names for the folks in the public who are not watching this slideshow. The top names were Concord Hills. Again, this would be Concord Hills Regional Park, Concord Naval Weapons Regional Park, Delta Hills, Delta View, Diablo Creek, Diablo Valley, Diablo Vista, Los Medanos, Meridian Hills, Monte del Diablo, Todos Santos. And what we did was we partnered with the City of Pittsburgh, the City of Concord, the nonprofit group Save Mount Diablo, and our own park district to put these 11 names on an online survey for people to take a look at. We added a 12th name of other, which would enable people to suggest their own name for a park. And we wanted to see what would receive the most votes. Well, we were really pleased with 1,200 different results, 1,200 different votes over just February, March, right before the COVID crisis began. And the top 4 vote getters were Concord Hills, Delta View, Monte del Diablo, and Los Medanos. So staff has sort of a set of slides of the advantages and disadvantages of those top 4 names. And then we're going to turn it over to Eddie to do a polling exercise with the Park Advisory Committee members. So Concord Hills Regional Park, starting with that, this has been used as the placeholder name for the future park during the land use planning process, actually going back to 2013. The advantage here, of course, is it's a very straightforward name and lets people know where they are and what to expect at the park. The disadvantage here is that the name was really just made up for the planning process, and it's not a previously recognized geographic name. Also, it centers Concord in the name of the park when this is a regional park and shares a boundary with Pittsburgh. Los Medanos Regional Park. This was named for the 1835 Mexican land grant, which at that time included what we know now as the cities of Pittsburgh, Bay Point, and Antioch. It's shown on this slide as the series of hills in the middle. It's the most widely recognized name of those hills between Concord and Pittsburgh. And that is its main advantage. It is the widely recognized geographic name for those hills. The disadvantage is that the future park is actually not on land that was the Rancho Los Medanos, and also that that name is now associated with the community college in Pittsburgh, Los Medanos College. Monte del Diablo Regional Park. This is the name of the 1834 Mexican land grant, and it includes land which today is in the city of Concord. The advantage here is that it recognizes the Mexican history of the land. The disadvantage is that it may be confused with nearby Mount Diablo State Park. And if we have time at the end, if people are interested, Eddie has some really interesting story about how the Monte del Diablo name got associated with this land in the first place. So we can ask Eddie for that if we have time and if there's interest. And finally, the top vote getter across all 4 surveys was Diablo Vista Regional Park. And that's because the views towards Mount Diablo to the south are really available to most parts of the future park. It really is a spectacular view of the park. That's the advantage. The disadvantage is that it sort of attributes the park's identity to Mount Diablo rather than to the unique features of the park itself. And we had this other category. So other was the chance for people to name what they thought the park should be named. And what emerged was, here's a word cloud that shows a lot of the different suggestions that came from the public. There were over 100 different suggestions. By far, native names were the biggest category. In the online survey, people suggested Chupcan, Miwok, Bay Miwok, Volvins Miwok, and Ohlone. However, no individual other name received more votes than the top 4 votes. So we didn't pull those out for discussion. You'll notice here a couple of different names that emerged larger than others. Henry George is the name of a 19th century economist. He's more associated with San Francisco, but it got a lot of votes on the Park District website. Parky McParkface is obviously a parody name, but it also got a lot of votes. Port Chicago Memorial and names related to the military history also received a lot of names. We wanted to mention about the native naming that it's a delicate situation because the Bay Miwok descendants and ancestors of the original Bay Miwok people, of course, still live in the Bay Area. And without their participation in the naming process, without their suggestion, we as staff felt, and we're interested to hear what the Parks Advisory Committee is interested to tell us about this, but we felt a native name for the park itself was, without the buy-in and participation of Native people themselves, it was felt to be culturally insensitive. And so we wanted to acknowledge that there is clearly a public interest in Native names, but as staff, we weren't moving forward any particular name. We are in the beginnings of informal discussions with Native representatives throughout the Bay Area, and hopefully by the next time we come back to the PAC in May, we'll have the results of those conversations. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Eddie. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let him share. This is going to be an exercise for the Park Advisory Committee to participate in their own polling exercise. Okay, Eddie, I'll let you take over.
Devin, and good evening, everyone, members of the PAC, staff, board members, members of the public listening at home. Again, Eddie Willis, planner for East Bay Regional Parks. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go through a live polling exercise. And this was set up, it's a couple of quick polls. We'll have about 60 seconds to do each segment as a group. And this was set up to mirror the public participation polls that we did a couple of months ago in February and early March. So I'm going to find the homepage here. Hopefully everyone can see that. To participate in this poll, we'll have the website at the top here. You go to swiftpolling.com and you enter the 5-digit access code, or you can text your votes. There's an auto-generated number at the top of the screen, and you can participate that way. It might be more fun if you go through a computer or a tablet or a smartphone, but you can also do it by texting. I'm going to go ahead and start the poll.
Before you start, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Adela Ho. I was just looking up the translation of what Los Medanos means. I mean, besides the land grant, and the translator on the said it means sand dunes. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, it refers to kind of the sandy shores of the Delta along the Pittsburgh Antioch waterfront.
Thank you.
Yeah, so it means the sand dunes.
Hey, Eddie, I just wanted to mention for Park District staff and others who are on the call, we're asking you not vote on this because we want to limit this to the PAC's input. So, just the PAC members, please just vote.
Okay, thank you, Brian, for that important note. We do want to capture this information and share it with our board of directors. So I'm going to press start and we'll give you about 60 seconds to participate.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm sorry. This is Linda.
Go ahead.
I'm just a little confused because if on the one hand, so you said you're continuing the conversations and looking for Native representation that you haven't had to get to this level of 4, and that those are going to continue. How will that work in if we vote now versus if you come up with a Native name?
Maybe Devin or Brian can field this question. It looks like they're both going live here. Go ahead, guys.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Devin.
Okay, thanks. For us, this exercise with the Parks Advisory Committee is more data. We've had all this great voting with the public and the online surveys. And it's one more data point that we can share both with the Native representatives when we speak with them and with the board when it finally comes to them in early June. Brian, did you want to add any more to that?
No, I was just going to share exactly that. The intent is when we come back to the executive committee, we'll be able to share, a number of different data points, what the public survey has said, what the PAC's input is, and certainly it's within the PAC's discretion to provide comments on it, on how they feel about a Native name tonight. We would love to hear that. And then we'll be presenting all of that to the executive committee. And bringing it back to the PAC, hopefully along with the input that we receive from Native peoples. So, so the intent is not to preclude that or discourage that name, but more to provide a suite of options to allow for a good sort of robust discussion as we're able to get the input.
This is Igor Skardov. Could I get some help on the mechanics of how to go about doing this voting?
Sure. Do you have access to a computer or a smartphone?
I'm on the computer. I can see the bar chart showing the totals so far, and I see your picture.
Okay, so you went to swiftpolling.com. You entered the 5-digit code.
How do I go to swiftpolling.com?
You'll just, Igor, you'll need to open up a browser. So just, you'll kind of need to minimize your Zoom window or whatever.
I just clicked on Safari.
Okay, so in your address bar, type in swiftpolling.com, and then it should bring up a prompt to add in this number, 11921.
Okay, I typed in swiftpolling.com, hit enter.
And then you press enter, and then it's going to ask for a 5-digit access code.
Okay.
Okay, so I'll just read out the access code. It's 11921.
11921. So join, right?
Yep, so if you press enter, it should take you to a multi-choice screen.
Okay, now I see them choices. Yeah.
And just pick one of those names. If you don't like any of those names, just pick the other category.
While you are waiting for everybody to vote, I see I have a couple of hands up. Maybe we can take those questions if it's all right with you now.
Sure. Did you get a chance to vote, Igor?
I did. I just voted yes.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the poll now.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Eddie, can I get a couple of questions in while you're waiting for that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. Bruce, you had your hand up.
I was solved. So Igor asked the question, and that helped me solve my question.
Oh, okay.
I'm
And
good.
Lisa?
I think I'll wait until after we're done with this exercise before I ask my question. Thanks.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you. Then we can go ahead then.
Okay, so for folks listening at home, I'll just read off the results from the highest to the lowest, which got votes. So the other category got the highest amount of votes, and that was followed, tied for second was Concord Hills and Delta View. In third place, we have Diablo Vista, and in fourth place, we have Delta Hills. And we did not receive votes for Diablo Creek, Diablo Valley, Los Medanos, Meridian Hills, Monte del Diablo, or Todos Santos. Okay, so just like the public, these were the choices they were allowed online. And then we had an other category. So if there was a different name you wanted to suggest, you could do so here. So when I start this poll, you'll be on the same screen and the same access code, but a different prompt will pop up and you can write in your own name. So you can use an existing name if you really like Concord Hills or Monte del Diablo, or one of those names. You can enter that. You can enter a different name entirely. Again, we want to ask that only PAC members vote so that we can pass on this information to our board. And again, we'll have about 60 seconds or so to do this.
Eddie, let's leave it a little longer.
Sure.
Eddie, this is Rick. I think also that on this screen, if people have more than one name they would like, they can enter it more than once. Is that correct?
That will skew the results. I think it will allow you to do that, but let's, for the sake of this poll, let's just keep it to one response. And we'll have a more official poll the next time we come to the PAC, I believe.
Okay, thank you.
But this will give us kind of the temperature of the room, and some suggestions to give the board a sense of where folks are coming from.
So Eddie, just while folks are voting, I see some chat about the interest in consulting with Native tribes. That outreach has been initiated, and I just want to mention that we consulted for a long time with our recently retired cultural resources coordinator, Beverly Ortiz. And Dr. Ortiz has a long history with Native peoples and a lot of great connections with Native peoples. And so we very much appreciated her input and really took a lot of that to heart. So we will continue to try to reach out to Native peoples, but our staff opinion at this point was really based on a lot of input from Dr. Beverly Ortiz and some of her thoughts around how to best approach this.
All right, folks, let's take about 20 more seconds and then I'll close this poll. It looks so far like Concord Hills is in the lead. If you haven't voted yet, now's your chance.
One caution I'll just also give on, I see that the Port Chicago Memorial name, that's come up throughout the naming process. I have been cautioned by my colleagues at National Park Service that, that don't necessarily want to see a name here that would diminish the significance of the actual Port Chicago Memorial. So they've had a real interest in their statement has basically been there's already a Port Chicago Memorial Park, and so we should acknowledge that park that's on the waterfront. Not to diminish our input here, but that's been the input that I've received.
Okay, so before I stop sharing my screen, I will just quickly read off the results for folks listening at home. So number one, it looks like by a large margin, is Concord Hills. We also, as Brian alluded to, have Port Chicago Memorial, Port Chicago, Diablo View, Delta Vista, Delta View, Delta Hills, Bay Miwok, a native name, and then a couple of suggestions: consult with Native Tribe, need Native input first. All right. Devin, did you want to add anything before I stop the screen share?
No, thanks to the members for participating. When we're done with this presentation, then you'll be able to have a discussion amongst yourselves. But this was just a chance to use some of the technology that we were using with the public, and we wanted you to have that opportunity as well.
And we'll capture this information here and some of the statistics, and we can certainly pass that on to the Board Executive Committee and future PAC meetings. Thank you all for participating. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to Devin.
Okay, thanks, Eddie. Rick, I want to do a time check with you. I see it's 6 o'clock.
Yes, technically we're at the end of our meeting, but hopefully people will be willing to stick around for a few minutes to finish up. So I think we can give you a few more minutes if that will benefit you.
Yes, it would. I want to finish my presentation so the PAC members can actually talk amongst themselves. So let me take you back to the presentation. And I wanted to give everyone just a quick sense of what the survey results were from the 4 online surveys. So here's the City of Concord. We had 300 or so votes. The other category was by far the biggest, but Concord Hills was the next, and followed by Monte del Diablo. In the City of Pittsburgh, we had 151 votes, and I want to thank Lisa for helping coordinate that survey, and Commissioner and Councilmember Obinger for helping me coordinate the survey with the City of Concord. At City of Pittsburgh, again, other was the top voted choice, but Los Medanos was the second, and Monte del Diablo third. Say Mount Diablo had 430 votes. There, Concord Hills was actually the #1 vote, followed by other, and a kind of a tie between Monte del Diablo and Los Medanos. And finally, the Park District Survey, thanks to Jen Money for putting this together. We also had other categories. Monte del Diablo was next, followed by Los Medanos and Concord Hills. So want to just wrap up to say that this is part of the adoption process of the land use plan, the EIR, and the choice of the name of the park. The next meeting for public will be May 7th at the Board Executive Committee. We'll be back on May 18th here at the Park Advisory Committee to seek your endorsement or your recommendation to Park District Board, both the name and the plan itself. And June 2nd is our anticipated date for the board directors to make their final decisions. Whether the final copy, final edition of the release plan, NEIR will
Your
be
sound is
released
breaking
Friday.
up.
Oh, is that right? I'm sorry. Okay. Let me just say that I'll finish up to say that June 2nd is the anticipated date of the Board of Directors meeting where they will determine district a name for the park and look at adopting the park land use plan and EIR. So with that, thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer questions and very interested in your discussion. Thank you.
Okay, I see that we have a question from Elisa.
Just a comment. I wanted to say thank you to Devin and the planners for reaching out to the City of Pittsburgh and engaging with us. That was one of my previous comments the last time that you presented to us. And I really appreciate you taking the time to reach out to Pittsburgh.
Yes, thank you for your help.
Great. And Carlin.
Thank you. So again, I do appreciate, I'd like to echo Elisa's comments and say thank you, Devin, for engaging the City of Concord in this process. And I'm looking in the chat box, I see some folks have asked, and I appreciate asking, what the people of Concord are thinking. What I will share with you is that this has not yet come before the Concord City Council. I did check in this morning, and I understand that on May 12th, it's scheduled to come before the City Council. In the meantime, the date is the data that you have, and it looks like, at least in the city of Concord, that Concord Hills was the name of choice. So that's what I have to share with you at this time, and I appreciate you asking me, and also our neighbor, the city of Pittsburgh, as we're trying to figure out what the best name is for this new gem in our midst.
Great, thank you. Louis.
Yes, I just want to say I hope we have a chance to name a trail after David Brubeck, because he's a native son and he grew up on a ranching family out in that area. You wouldn't think about it, but the jazz musician group on a ranch. So I thought it was kind of interesting, and I think it'd be great to name a trail at least after him.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for that suggestion. Some folks did suggest Dave Brubeck and other local luminaries. Of course, there's many trails and roads and natural areas. All of that will be named separately, sort of during the implementation part of the park's development. So there'll be opportunities for future naming suggestions to staff.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Devin, Eddie, Brian, thank you very much. We look forward to hearing from you again next month after you have input from the native groups and from the executive committee, and I'm sure we will take it another step at that time.
Okay, thanks. Thank you very much for the time tonight.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are now at the point in the meeting for committee members for comments, and so I'll look for hands for those who'd like to make a comment. No one. Everybody's ready to go home for dinner.
Member Andrade has his hand raised.
Well, just real, yeah, I guess I have my hand up. Just real quick, I found some trails when I was searching in the area. There were, I guess, deer trails that were undeveloped or underdeveloped. And I'm thinking, this with all the people out these days, we may want to pay attention to developing some more trails that are a little bit just to have more available, because I think one reason why they're concentrated is there's only a few major trails, and these other trails are not as well known or developed, and people don't go on them, but they're some really fascinating areas to go to. Just a thought, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Irene.
Hi. I just wanted to thank Sharon and the Park District staff for putting this Zoom together. You guys did a great job. There's always a curve on everything, and good job. Thank you.
Yes, they've worked hard at this, and they're getting pretty good at it now after a month and a half.
Good.
Any other comments from members of the committee? I would like to just report something I've discovered during this period is that I've been able to attend the regular and special board meetings because they've been broadcast on YouTube, and it makes it a lot easier to listen in on the meetings. So if you're interested in what's going on with the district, check the website and see when the meetings are held, and tune in for those YouTube broadcasts. It's it can be very interesting. Let's see, Igor,
Yes, am I unmuted?
you're on.
Okay, I would just like to suggest that really it would be nice if it was a Native American themed title of some sort, but I understand the complexity, and I think that consulting with the local representatives of the various Native peoples would be really a key element in all this, and maybe they would be able to suggest some kind of a title that would not narrow it down to just one of the subgroups.
Yeah, I suspect they will come back with more information after they meet with them. I look forward to that. Okay, any other comments? Any old business? Any new business? Seeing no hands raised, the Park Advisory Committee of April 27th, 2020 is now adjourned as of 6:11 p.m. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rick.
Great job, Rick.
Thanks.
Thanks all.
Good
Thanks, Shannon.
job.
Thanks, Rick.
Thank you. Oh,
Rick. Everyone stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
okay, I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you very much. Unless, Director Lane, did you have something to say?